16-year-old Haymitch Abernathy stands at the invisible edge of an arena. It is his birthday, the day he was taken from home, and one opponent remains. She has an axe. He has no weapon, only one step toward a boundary every tribute fears. The axe leaves her hand, passes him, and strikes the force field. The arena throws it back. Cameras capture an unexpected victor, but not the truth they will soon help erase. Haymitch wins the Second Quarter Quell. That is not when he escapes the Hunger Games. It is when the games begin following him for life. This is the complete book story, how the Capitol rewrote his games, what victory cost him and Lenore dove, and what the sunrise in the title really means. Panem watched him win. So why does almost no one know what he really did? 24 years before the first Hunger Games novel, Panem prepares for its 50th games. Because this is the Second Quarter Quell, the Capitol doubles the number of tributes taken from every district. That rule does its damage long before the arena opens. Twice as many children means more families watching, more alliances under pressure, and more fear turned into national entertainment. Haymitch begins that morning as a boy with a home, a mother, a younger brother, and Lenore Dove, the girl he loves. By the end of the reaping, the Capitol has claimed him. How it claims him is where the story splits in two. One version is plain. His name is drawn, it is read out, and he walks up. The other version is uglier. Another District 12 boy, Woodbine, is taken first, tries to run, and is killed where everyone can see it. Haymitch moves to protect Lenore. He is named as the replacement, and the ceremony is staged and filmed a second time so the result looks orderly. Both versions circulate, and neither one folds into the other. That distance is already the subject. Was his name drawn, or did the camera make a punishment look like chance? That question reveals the real contest before the arena even opens. If the Capitol can control the public record of who was chosen and why, propaganda has already begun before the first tribute reaches the train. If stories about power, survival, and the truths buried under familiar worlds are your kind of thing, take a moment to subscribe before we go back into the arena. Whatever version Panem is shown, Haymitch is sent away with 3 other tributes from District 12, Wyatt Callow, Louella McCoy, and Maysilee Donner. 4 young people leave the district. Yet before the games begin, Capitol viewers are presented with something even stranger. 5 identities passing through 4 places. Louella dies in an accident involving the tribute transport. For an ordinary government, that would be a death to acknowledge. For the Capitol, it is a gap in a scheduled program, and gaps get filled. A similar-looking girl, drugged and controlled, is placed into Louella's role and called Lulu. Think about what that means. Louella is gone, but the broadcast still needs a Louella-shaped figure. So the Capitol goes further than cutting around reality. It puts another living person inside the empty space and demands that the cameras, the audience, and eventually history accept the substitution. This is the first clear answer to what the Capitol cut from Haymitch's games. The rewriting did not begin after he won. It began before the arena, when the continuity of the show mattered more than the identity of a child. Haymitch learns that being alive in front of a camera and being recognized as yourself are 2 different things. That lesson changes what survival can mean. Haymitch has walked into a production rather than a contest, one in which the state can replace a person, replay an event, and call the result truth. And behind that production, other people are already working out how to make the machine fail. BT, his son Ampert, and Plutarch Heavensby are all connected to a larger effort against the arena. What matters is the shape of it. Technical knowledge exists outside Haymitch. Resistance already has roots, and he is being pulled into something far larger than one tribute's attempt to stay alive. This changes the familiar image of Haymitch as a solitary, instinctive victor. He is observant and dangerous, but he is not the only person who sees weakness in the system. BT's knowledge links the games to the technology that sustains them. Ampert becomes part of the action inside. Plutarch points toward a rebellion that will take years to become visible. The idea beneath their plan is simple. The games feel like a law of nature only while everyone treats them that way. What if the arena is not an all-powerful world? What if it is a machine with pipes, controls, and vulnerable parts? Their objective goes well past helping Haymitch last one more day. They want the Capitol to lose control of its own show, live, in front of everyone. Then the tributes enter an arena designed to disguise control as beauty. Its landscapes appear abundant and inviting, but the environment is part of the weapon. Water can be poisoned, pollen can carry danger, engineered creatures can be directed against the people trapped inside. Nothing that looks natural can be trusted because nature itself has been arranged for broadcast. The doubled field intensifies every pressure. More tributes mean that encounters come faster, alliances become more necessary, and betrayal becomes easier for the audience to anticipate. The capital has increased not only the body count but the density of the spectacle. Haymitch survives by refusing to see the arena as scenery. He watches for patterns. He studies limits. He asks what each danger needs in order to function. So ask the question with him. If the system controls the food, the water, the landscape, and the exits, what is the most powerful weapon inside the arena? It is not the sharpest blade. It is the infrastructure keeping the arena alive. Haymitch's attention turns below the surface, toward the water system and the structures that support it. Maysilee will matter later as an ally with judgment and resistance of her own, but at this stage, the larger plan pulls Haymitch and Amper toward a target no tribute is supposed to treat as a target at all. Other contestants are expected to fight one another. These two intend to attack the conditions of the fight. They move into the arena's maintenance and water network, where the illusion of wilderness gives way to machinery. The risk is enormous. Every moment spent on sabotage is a moment not spent hiding from the other tributes or the arena's engineered threats. But the sequence matters. They identify a dependency, reach the system that supplies it, and damage the structure badly enough to unleash a flood. For a brief period, the games stop behaving like a flawless ritual. Water tears through controlled spaces. The arena's order breaks. The broadcast loses the clean shape the capital built for it. A tribute has done something more dangerous than kill another tribute. He has shown that the supposedly absolute world around them can malfunction. The sabotage falls short, the arena survives it, and everyone trapped inside stays trapped. That partial failure is exactly why the moment matters. A machine only has to break once, in public, to stop looking eternal. And this is exactly the material the capital's broadcast cannot afford to keep. If viewers see only a disaster, the state remains powerful. If they see tributes deliberately attacking the water system, they learn a different lesson. The games are built by people, maintained by people, and therefore vulnerable to people. The machine recovers. That is the brutal middle truth of Haymitch's story. Resistance creates a rupture, but the capital still controls the environment, the cameras, and most of the ways out. The surviving tributes remain trapped, while the arena resumes its work and the space around them becomes more dangerous. Now the scale narrows. A flood can make resistance look enormous, but Haymitch is still a 16-year-old being hunted inside a structure designed to outlast him. The plan bought him no ending, only attention of the worst kind. The people running the games now know that someone inside understands how they work. The capital can later present the disruption as another arena hazard. It can separate Haymitch from Ampert in the story it tells. It can begin constructing the image of a lone victor before the real contest has even ended. That is the advantage of controlling both the battlefield and the edit. Even failure can be reassigned to nature while cooperation disappears. Haymitch now has to survive without believing that survival alone is victory. When the larger sabotage fails to finish the job, he needs another ally and another weakness. That brings Maysilee Donner from the edge of the District 12 group into the center of the story. Maysilee arrives as far more than a future death placed in Haymitch's path. She makes choices, reads danger, and recognizes that cooperation may offer more than the capital's preferred script of isolated children turning on one another. She and Haymitch form an alliance. Trust has very little to do with it. The arena has made solitary survival its own kind of trap. Look at it from her side for a moment. Maysilee has watched the same reaping, the same cameras, the same rehearsed ceremony, and she has drawn her own conclusions about what the capital wants from a girl like her. She does not follow Haymitch. She decides that working with him is the better use of whatever time she has left. Together they reach the outer limits of the constructed world and discover the importance of the force field. A boundary is supposed to communicate one command: stop. Do not question what lies beyond it. Do not touch the mechanism. Accept the edge as permanent. Haymitch sees something else. The field does not merely block objects. It can send them back. That physical rule opens a possibility, though not yet a victory. Can the wall meant to confine him be made to strike on his behalf? And if he wins that way, why would President Snow treat the result as something more threatening than an unusual ending? The answer begins with Maysilee. Their alliance proves that tributes do not have to perform the roles assigned to them, but the arena still has ways to answer resistance. Engineered creatures are sent into the contest, and Maysilee is killed. Haymitch loses more than a partner. He loses the one person beside him who had seen the system clearly and refused it anyway. He continues alone. though the word now carries two meanings. In reality, he carries the knowledge and choices of people who worked with him. In the version the Capitol can construct, he can be made to appear as if cooperation never mattered at all. Eventually, the contest contracts to Haymitch and one last opponent, Silka. She has the axe. He has reached the field. We are back at the image from the beginning, but now the boundary is no longer just a mysterious trick. It is the second weakness he has learned to read. Silka attacks. Haymitch places himself near the invisible edge. The axe passes him. It meets the force field. And the arena sends it back. The returning weapon kills Silka, leaving Haymitch as the last survivor. He does not win by outfighting her. He wins by making the arena's own defensive mechanism decide the outcome. Then, rather than accepting the ending as the Capitol intends, he continues trying to damage the field and the structure around it. That choice turns an ingenious victory into a political insult. The games are over, but the battle over what Panem is allowed to understand has just begun. A whole country watched Haymitch survive, but watching something happen is not the same as being told what it meant. The Capitol can reorder footage, remove context, reduce alliances, and detach the flood or the field from the choices that caused them. Convincing anyone that Haymitch lost was never necessary. Owning the reason he won was enough. The public version can leave behind a difficult, clever, solitary boy who found a loophole. What it cannot safely preserve is the connected chain. People shared knowledge, tributes cooperated, the water system was attacked, the arena stopped working, the force field was turned against the final contest, and Haymitch kept trying to break the structure after victory was already his. Remember the question from the beginning. If Panem watched Haymitch win, why did so few people later understand what he had done? Because the Capitol owned the final edit. The country was given a victor. It was never shown the demonstration. That also answers why the force field ending enrages Snow. The danger is not one dead opponent or one embarrassing trick. The danger is a repeatable thought. Systems have rules. Rules can be studied. A boundary can be reversed. A machine can be damaged. Once that idea survives in public memory, another person may try it again. Snow cannot erase the fact that a victor emerged from a nationally staged event, so the Capitol edits the rebellion out of the victory, brings Haymitch home, and turns homecoming into the next arena. The victor's promise is supposed to be protection, status, and a life beyond the reaping. Haymitch returns to District 12 and discovers that none of those promises constrain the man he humiliated. His mother and younger brother die in a fire at their home. The message is unmistakable. Winning cannot shield the people he loves. But Snow's punishment becomes even more intimate with Lenore. She belongs to the Covey community. She represents the life Haymitch imagined beyond the Capitol's spectacle, and Snow turns an ordinary piece of that life into a weapon. A poisoned candy is arranged to reach her. Haymitch does not know what it is. He gives it to Lenore. She dies, and the design of the punishment becomes clear. Snow takes the person Haymitch loves and then goes further. He makes Haymitch's own hand part of the chain so that grief arrives fused with guilt. The arena's weapons were visible. This one looks harmless, passes through an act of care, and leaves no national audience to witness what it does. Now the full price of the force field victory is revealed. Snow is punishing Haymitch for showing that the games can be understood, disrupted, and used against their makers. Survival alone was never the offense. The deaths at home are meant to turn one rebel into a warning for every victor who follows. First, the Capitol removes Haymitch's resistance from the public story. Then it transforms his private love into evidence he can use against himself for the rest of his life. He receives the title of victor and loses almost everything that could have made survival feel like rescue. This is how the later Haymitch comes into focus. The isolated, alcoholic mentor from the original trilogy is what remains after a deliberate sequence has run its course. The arena fails to kill him. Propaganda takes away the truth of what he did. Snow takes away the people to whom he might have returned. Even Haymitch's damaged public image can serve the Capitol. A broken victor tells future tributes that resistance leads nowhere. If viewers know him only as bitter, unreliable, and alone, they are less likely to see the state's work behind that outcome. His suffering becomes an unofficial continuation of the broadcast. This is where the idea of implicit submission operates on three levels. Personally, Haymitch moves from living under the reaping as an unavoidable fact to attacking the rules around him. Inside the arena, alliances and sabotage prove that tributes can refuse the program's demand that they exist only as enemies. Across Panem, the Capitol must hide those choices, because its authority depends on people believing there is no alternative. But a hidden story is still a story. Haymitch survives long enough to meet Katniss and Peeta, two people who will carry the same insight farther than he could. The system is constructed. The rules are not nature, and eventually the capital will lose its ability to edit every act of defiance back into submission. That is why the book is called Sunrise on the Reaping. The title takes aim at the assumption underneath the ritual, because the reaping happened yesterday and the year before, and for generations before that, people are encouraged to imagine that it must happen forever. But the past is not a command. Haymitch does not end the reaping, yet he proves its machinery can fail. Years later, Katniss helps an entire country see a similar truth, and this time the capital cannot contain every image or control the ending. Sunrise is the possibility of a morning no longer governed by the old ritual. After the war of the original trilogy, Haymitch finally tells Katniss and Peeta the history that had been taken from him. His care for Geese carries his memory of Lenore forward. It cures nothing. It proves that the capital did not get to decide what he was allowed to remember. Now, the strongest loop closes. Panem once received the capital's version of its victor. Katniss and Peeta receive Haymitch's version of the people, alliances, sabotage, love, and punishment that the broadcast reduced or erased. The truth cannot return the dead, but it can deny the regime the last word. The sunrise is not Haymitch walking out of the arena unharmed. It is the next generation no longer accepting the reaping as a natural law. His first victory was making the arena's weapon rebound. His final victory is making the capital's story rebound too. Tell me what truly destroyed Haymitch, the arena or the victory they rewrote, then share this story and subscribe.